Welcome into today's presentation for the Pathways to Mental Wellbeing. My name is Jared Mueller. I'm an independently licensed social worker with a supervision designation. I've worked for over 20 years in our area on mental health. And in that time, we have seen that stress management is a huge concern for pretty much everyone. The problem is we often think of stress management as something we have to think our way through. Today, you're going to learn about patterned repetitive behaviors as the key initial step towards stress management. The reality is that stress, and when I say stress, it's not always a bad thing. Stress can just mean you have a lot going on, you have a tight schedule. It can even be good things that are just a little overwhelming. Stress can also be things like anxiety, depression, trauma. There can be a lot of things that are stressful. And the reality is the world that we live in has its own day-to-day stresses, whether it's making it to work, being able to pay for bills, all kinds of different things that can overload our system. All stress activates our stress response system. That same initial reaction, that fight, flight, and freeze, is activated with all stress. We may only think of fight, flight, and freeze in significant situations, right? The person lifting the car off of somebody else, or running into a burning building. But the reality is that our stress response system, which leads to the fight, flight, and freeze and controls that, activates in all stresses. Now, the type and severity of the stress can decide the kind of intensity and duration of that reaction. So a little bit of stress, you're going to get a little of the fight, flight, and freeze. A lot of it, let's just say a bear broke into this room right now, I'm going to get a lot of the fight, flight, and freeze. But it's key to know that while the intensity is more, the reaction is the same. It is a protective reaction. When you get stressed out, the reason that your heart rate speeds up is that your body is rushing adrenaline, endorphins, oxygen, nutrients, chemicals, hormones. It's rushing it to your body because it thinks you need to fight, flight, or the freeze is more about protecting kind of your vital organs and keeping yourself safe. And you could just be sitting on a couch, watching TV, driving in a car. But that response is to protect us, to give us the ability to keep ourselves safe, because when we stress, our brain, our bodies think we are in danger. And what kicks in is what's called our brainstem, or our animal brain. You might have heard it called the lizard brain. That's kind of the new language that's being used. When we stress, our animal brain is the first to respond. And it responds strongly with that fight, flight, and freeze. That response can be influenced greatly by our experiences, traumas, those types of things. As you see there on the slide, that dog looks a little vicious. I actually have a cousin who had a dog that would react just like that when it was smiling. That was its happy face. Took me a second to learn that. Initially, had a lot of fight, flight, and freeze. But a dog doesn't even have to look that way. Based on your experiences, maybe some traumatic events in your childhood, any dog, the panting, the noise, the smell, could all of a sudden raise your stress response system. Because your initial response is survival rated, not logical, right? Look at this cute little puppy. Not really afraid of that little puppy, but unfortunately, if you've had some negative experiences, that initial response makes you believe that you are in danger. And it raises your heart rate. It raises your adrenaline, all of those kind of things. Even if it's not logical and it's just a cute little puppy. Your brainstem is incapable of being logical. It is just reacting. And when it is reacting, it is incapable of calming down by itself. It needs some kind of intervention, right? We've all been there. We've all probably said, I wasn't thinking when or if I would have just thought about it a little bit longer, I wouldn't have. I don't even remember what I was thinking when. And the blunt reality is that is actually an accurate statement. When we are in that fight, flight, and freeze, we are not as capable of thinking clearly. A lot of our brain's neurological energy is down there in that animal brain, so we are acting animal instead of human. And so the first thing we need to do, we must calm our stress response system so that we can think logically, so we can return that energy to that top part of our brain, our cortex. Many of us, whether we are the ones stressed out or we're interacting with someone who's stressed out, try to engage them with thought and with logic. The problem is that tends to make things more difficult. Try to be logical with a 2-year-old who you just took away their sucker because they were making a mess. Not going to go well. Try to be logical with your dog when you try to take away whatever that food item it dug out of the trash can. It's not going to go well. Unfortunately, when we are emotional and we're having a stress reaction, we are more like that 2-year-old and that animal than we are whatever our current age is. So we first need to regulate our stress response system. And the primary way we can do that is through what's called patterned repetitive behaviors. And it is exactly what it sounds like. We want to be doing things that are calm and that are consistent. If you think about fight, flight, and freeze, again, that bear breaking into this room, that's chaos, right? That is doing whatever you can to survive. We need to do the opposite to calm that stress response system. Many of you have probably been in a classroom or in a meeting where someone, thankfully I didn't bring one today to annoy you, but has been clicking their pen. Just constantly click, 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 click. The reality is they may not be aware of it, but that is actually a patterned repetitive behavior because they were either stressed or bored in the meeting, and their brain was trying to calm them down. And so they started clicking. Children will rock, right? And we've seen this with some adults as well, and teenagers will kind of do this rocking thing. It helps them calm down. Sometimes we're just trying to calm them down from something really exciting and really fun, but exciting and fun can sometimes activate that stress response system because there's a lot going on. And so simple rocking activities are patterned and repetitive. We can also do things as simple as twiddling our thumbs or spinning our rings, physiological patterned repetitive behaviors. Again, it's a calming activity as opposed to fight, flight, and freeze. But it's key to realize this is not thinking. This is physical patterned repetitive behaviors. Things like fidget spinners can work, fidget cubes, stress balls, those type of physical things to have them available to you so that you can do something that is patterned repetitive, that doesn't require thought, that is just calming. For other people, doodling will work, whether it's just making lines or actually drawing something. It creates that patterned repetitive behavior. Native American drum circles are actually known to work for stress because they are patterned and repetitive. Going for walks are patterned and repetitive. It's why many people will use working out as a stress reliever because the activity, bench press, curls, walking, stretching, yoga is a great patterned repetitive behavior. All of them create kind of that patterned repetitive. They don't require thought. You are just experiencing a patterned repetitive experience. The reality of patterned repetitive behaviors is you need to have a plan. If you are someone who struggles with stress management, it's important you know what you are going to do. It has to work for you, your environment, your situation. At work, I just can't get up and walk. I can't go to the gym. So what will work for me when I'm struggling with a stress situation? Fidget spinner, clicking a pen, twiddling my thumbs, some of those types of things will work. At other times, if I'm at home, going for a walk is an option, but I need to have a plan that's individualized for me. I need to prepare. I need to know when stressful situations, if I can, are on the horizon. So before recording this video, while I love doing these, this can be a little bit of a stressful situation. So I sat in the car for just a moment, did a couple patterned repetitive behaviors, took a couple deep breaths, and then came inside. I knew this would be a little bit of stress. So I was prepared for a situation. Now, we can't always do that. We don't always know when stress is coming. But if we do, we need to prepare to do things beforehand to relax ourselves. If we can, do things during the stressful situation, and certainly after, because we want to get out of that animal response as quickly and as much as possible. We also need to practice. We need to know what that looks like for us or what that experience is like for us, how long we need it. So we need to maybe just have them in our schedule. Even if we're not stressed out or don't have the stressful situations, practicing pattern repetitive behavior can just keep us a little bit more relaxed, but it can also prepare us because a trained mind goes back to those trained activities when we are struggling. It's important to know pattern repetitive behaviors can be used proactively, like I talked about in the car before coming in here. I did some proactive things to kind of bring my stress level down, but we can also do them reactively. So we had a stressful situation, we find ourselves stressed out, our heart is racing, our breathing is shallow, we feel that fight, flight, and freeze, that adrenaline, that endorphins, those chemicals all kind of pumping. We don't need to think, we need to go as quickly as possible into some of those practice patterned repetitive behaviors. The good thing about being proactive is that if all day long, every once in a while I'm doing a pattern repetitive behavior, that proactivity kind of keeps my stress level low. Instead of waiting until it gets too high and I overreact and some of those kind of things, if I'm proactively doing some pattern repetitive behaviors, I can keep my stress level lower all day long. And then finally, once we regain control, that is when we can go into some of the logical conversation, processing of situations or whatever. But trying to do so before we've regulated, before we've regained control, or trying to make somebody else do that, be logical, think clearly, remember what you told me yesterday, remember your goals, trying to do all of that while they are in their animal brain, while they're in their stress response system, is really unhealthy. It tends to actually exacerbate the stress. So instead, we do some pattern repetitive behaviors. Once they're able to regain control, then we can have those conversations. It's important also from a Christ perspective, right? The Bible is very clear to us that stress is not good for us. Philippians, my favorite verse, it tells us don't be anxious. It tells us don't stress, right? And so if it tells us don't stress, how can we not stress? Yes, we can think, right? We can feed what we want to grow. We can think about what is good, holy, true, noble, praiseworthy, or excellent. But we can also physiological, right? God made us the way we are, right? There is interconnectivity between some of the things in an animal and some of the things as a human. We can use that pattern repetitive behavior to bring us down, to reduce that anxiety so that we can think clearly and so the God of peace can be with us. Psalms often talks about meditating, right? It talks about clearing your mind, calming your mind, right? Meditation in and of itself can be a pattern repetitive behavior because breathing is involved. And often it is a slow, steady breathing process. Well, that's patterned and that's repetitive. That's what we want. And so when we meditate, when we calm our cortex, when we calm our thinking, we also calm that brain stem because we have done some calming pattern repetitive behaviors. We also need to renew our mind. We need to realize that just because I have a stress reaction doesn't mean I need to stress about those things. But first, we need to calm ourselves so that we can renew our mind, so that we can change our reactions. And finally, Timothy talks about mental exercise. It talks about what are we thinking about? It talks about how do we process things? Well, we need to have a calm brainstem, right? We can't be animalistic and do healthy thinking, healthy prayer, healthy mental exercises. Timothy often talks about leadership and our role in our community. One of our roles is to show and teach people how to respond to stress. And the simplest and the most calming activity we can do is patterned, repetitive behaviors. So the next time you're in Bible study or in a meeting and someone is tapping their foot, someone is clicking their pen, just know that they are doing patterned, repetitive behaviors whether they know it or not. And that means they're either stressed about something, bored, or both. We just want to encourage them to be a little quieter about it. Maybe go to the twiddling of the thumbs. Thank you for listening today to today's Pathway to Wellbeing, talking about stress management, how we use patterned repetitive behavior to not only get through stressful situations, but also to reduce the amount of stress in our lives. I hope this finds you on your pathway to mental well-being.